right, so ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be discussing balancing chemical equations. So the PhET simulation that you guys were supposed to have worked on over the weekend was an introduction to that. So we're going to go a little bit more into detail and practice it together as a team. So the very, very first step that we are going to want to do when we're balancing chemical equations is we are going to want to count. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you. We are going to count the number of atoms of each element. I always start going from left to right. So I always start on the reactant side. And go to the product side. Okay, so on the reactant side, I look at each individual element and I see that there's a subscript of 2 behind aluminum, so that tells me I have 2 aluminums. I see that there is a subscript of 3 behind oxygen, so I'm going to have 3 oxygens. Now I'm going to go to the other side of the arrow, and I see that there is a subscript. There's no subscript behind aluminum, so that tells me I have 1 aluminum, and there are 2 subscripts behind oxygen, or there's a subscript of 2 behind oxygen, tells me I have 2 oxygens. So the first step you have to do is you have to identify or count the number of atoms that are present at the beginning. Questions about that? Can I go forward?
Will they ever be going from a reactant and have to make a product, or will it all be given to you?
We will be giving it to them.
Okay, so they'll never have to go from one and create the other.
No.
Okay, so that's not
that is not a thing.
Okay.
All right, ready? Next?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you go to balance, I always, like I said before, I always tend to go from left to right, or reactants to products. We pick an element that's not equal on both sides of the equation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look like this diagram, or this set of boxes down here is an organizer that helps me keep track of the elements that I have on both sides of the arrow. Remember, the arrow is the yield sign, but in chemistry, it's the same thing as the equal sign in math. So when all is said and done, I have to end up with the same number of aluminums and oxygens on both sides of the arrow. In this particular case, I'm going to start with aluminum, and I'm going to identify that the aluminums are not balanced. They're not equal. I have 2 aluminums as reactants, and I have 1 aluminum as a product. So the very, very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a coefficient to the front of the formula with that element to adjust their counts. So what that means is that in this case, because the aluminum is not balanced, I'm going to say, well, what can I do to make my aluminums balance? The thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a coefficient of 2 here. And by me putting a coefficient of 2 here, what it has done is it has changed the number of aluminums on the right side now from 1 to 2 times 1, which is 2. So my aluminums are balanced. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So we added a coefficient of 2 here. We balanced this at this point. Now I'm going to go back and try to figure out how to balance my oxygens. And this is where your knowledge of some math comes into play. Okay. It's not very easy for me to get, because my oxygens here are not balanced. I have 3 on one side and I have 2 on the other side. And by simply adding a coefficient of something doesn't make it work really easily. Like if I put a coefficient of like 1 here, don't write this down yet, but if I put a coefficient of 1 here, that gives me 3, but me putting a coefficient of 1 here gives me 2, and it doesn't really change anything. So what I usually tell kids is I look at the number of each element on both sides, and I see that I have an odd number here and an even number here. And so I call this the odd even balancing hint. And the odd even balancing hint says I need to use the lowest common, you're close, multiple.
That too.
So what would be the lowest common multiple of 3 and 2? Well, we've already decided that 1 won't work, but that's good. So if we said that, right, So what would be another common multiple? It would be 6, right? So in this case, the lowest common multiple between 3 and 2 is 6. So I'm going to use a coefficient in both cases in an effort to get both sides to have 6. So I'm going to start on my right side, and I'm going to put a coefficient of 3 here. That coefficient gives me 3 times 2, which will give me 6 oxygens. But now I don't have 6 oxygens on the left side, so I'm going to go ahead and put a coefficient of 2 here, because now my 2 times this 3 is going to give me my 6 oxygens. But wait, what has happened now? Has the number of aluminums changed? If I take the 2 times 3, that gave me my 6 oxygens, but by putting a coefficient out here, it has now changed the number of aluminums. So now I don't have 2 aluminums anymore. I have 2 times 2, which is 4 aluminums, which means that now my oxygens are balanced, but my aluminums are now unbalanced. So what am I going to do to rebalance my aluminums? Well, I'm going to have to change this coefficient. So I'm going to cross this one out, and I'm going to put a coefficient of 4 here, because 4 times 1 is 4. So this reaction is balanced when I have coefficients of 2, 4, and 3. We're going to practice this because this is hard. Yes, sir. I can go back to step 2, yes.
Wait, hold on. Just step 2.
Can I go on? Yes? Okay. The stunning silence says I'm going to go on. Okay. Now, let's try to do this one more together. So we did step 4. So now we're going to do this one more together as a team. Okay. So the very, very first step that we are going to do is we're going to start from left to right and count the number of atoms present. There's no subscript behind P, so that tells me that I have 1 phosphorus. There is a subscript of 2 behind oxygen, so I have 2 oxygens. On the product side, I have a subscript of 4, so that's 4 phosphoruses, and I have a subscript of 10, so that's 10 oxygens. Okay. Oh, sorry. I don't know why I put a 0. I should have put a 2. Thank you for catching that. Yeah, yes, I think I hit. So this should be a 2, and this should be a 10. Okay. Now, going from left to right, are my phosphoruses equal to each other? Yes or no? No, they are not. So I'm going to put a coefficient. I'm going to do what I can to make them equal. And in this case, I'm going to put a coefficient of 4 here, because 4 times 1 will give me 4. So my phosphoruses are balanced. Congratulations. Now, I'm going to have to look at my oxygens. Are my oxygens balanced going from left to right? Yes, no? No, they are not. Okay, so what can I do to make these balance? I have 2 oxygens on the left side, and I have 10 oxygens on the right side. What can I add that will multiply times 2 to get to 10?
What do you think, Josh?
It'll be a 5, okay? So we are going to put a coefficient of 5 out front here, and 5 will distribute here and give 5 times 2 will give me 10, okay? Now, the last thing, like I told you guys earlier, is that I'm going to always put a coefficient even if there doesn't need to be one. So I'm going to put a coefficient of 1 here. Now, are my phosphoruses balanced? Yes. Are my oxygens balanced? Yes. So this is balanced. All right, good. Now, what we're going to do is I'm giving you this one to try. So flip the page over. You have room to do this. It's actually already written there for you. So I'm going to give you this one to try. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to try it, and then we'll go through the answer together.
I
Okay, so all right, so in any case, the first thing I'm going to do, just like before, is we're going to count our atoms. So on this side, I'm going to identify that I have Hg. I don't like that color. I have Hg on this side of the arrow, and I have Hg on this side of the arrow. I have O on this side of the arrow, and I have O on this side of the arrow. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to count the number of each of them. So going from left to right, I see that I have how many Hgs? 1. And how many O's? 1. And on the product side, how many Hgs do I have? 1. And how many O's? 2 on the product side. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and try to balance. So when I'm going to try to balance, do I need to balance my Hgs at this point? I do not yet, because they're equal on both sides. Okay. Do I need to balance my O's though? I do. So what should I put where? What will balance my O's? I could put a 2. Where could I put it? In front of the left side. So if I put a coefficient of 2 here, that's going to give me 2 Hgs and 2 O's. So now my O's are balanced, but my Hgs are not. So what am I going to do to try to balance my Hgs this time? What? A 2 in front of Hg. So if I put a 2 in front of Hg, that gives me 2 Hgs on both sides, 2 O's on both sides. So we're going to call this balanced. And we're going to give that a little smiley face because everybody's happy. So in this case, if I put a coefficient of 1 here, which is what I'm going to do, every space has been used up, and all of the numbers are equal on both sides. Yes, because we love everybody equally. We don't just love all the beautiful people. We can't all be beautiful like Mr. Sussick.
Look at me.
Okay.
Now, I'm gonna get you started on this one. Okay. The first thing you need to do here is Na, H, and O. And on this side, you need to do Na, H, and O. Okay. Now I'm gonna stop for a second, and I'm gonna have you guys try to figure this one out. This one's a little bit more challenging. Let's talk about this guy here. Okay. So, stop it.
We took a short break.
So counting, I counted 1 sodium. I counted 1. Where's my pen? Why is my pen not working? Oh, that might be why. Because I'm always basically in this class I'm talking to myself all the time.
Why do you say stupid things?
I have one sodium, I have 2 hydrogens, and I have 1 oxygen. And on this side, I have 1 sodium, I have 3 hydrogens, and 1 oxygen. Okay. Now, the problem with this is that we're going to go from left to right. So I'm looking at my sodiums, and I see that they are balanced. I'm looking at my oxygens also. They are balanced. I'm seeing that my hydrogens are not. Now, what did I tell? Excuse me. What did I tell you about when they're odd even?
You find the greatest multiple?
Not the greatest. The lowest common multiple. Good. So if it's an odd even, we use the lowest.
6.
Whoa, that's not even words. That's like how Jalen talks.
So he'll understand it.
Yeah. The lowest common multiple.
Okay.
Okay. Now, in this case, I want to make sure that I have that the lowest common multiple of 2 and 3 would be 6. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to put a coefficient of, let's see, I'm going to put a coefficient of 3 here. And that will give me my 3 times 2 will give me 6 hydrogens. but it's going to also give me 3 oxygens. Okay. And then over here, in order for me to get this to balance out, one of the things that I might want to do is I might want to put a coefficient of 2 here, which seems to have screwed this one up a little bit. So we're going to play a little bit. So in this case here, I'm going to have my 2 sodiums, my 2 oxygens, and 2 times 3 is 6 hydrogens. But that's not okay, because it's not 6, it's well, it is 6. What is it? It's 4. I lied. Because the 2 distributes to the sodium, it distributes to the oxygen, and it distributes to the hydrogen. So that gives me my 2, but it only gives me 2 oxygens here, or 2 hydrogens here rather. So that gives me only 4. So that didn't work out. So sometimes when things don't work out, we have to erase and go back. Okay. So I know, oh my gosh, it's so awful that you might have to like erase and go back. So we're going to erase and go back, and we're going to try this again, because sometimes the hints don't. Oh no.
You have whiteout?
I don't own whiteout because I don't normally make mistakes.
Oh.
I had whiteout, but somebody stole my pencil case.
Also sorry about that.
I hate thieves.
A rock star.
I had all my colorful pens.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back and try to figure this out, because we still have 1 and 2 and 1 and 1 and 3 and 1. So in order for us to make this work out, I'm going to try to make this 3. So sometimes you might want to try to make them make them even. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recognize that I probably want to put a coefficient of 2 here. And if I put a coefficient of 2 here, that will distribute to the sodium, that will distribute to the oxygen, that will distribute to the hydrogen. So that's going to give me a total of 2 sodiums. It's going to give me a total of 2 oxygens, and it's going to give me, that's going to be a 2 here. So 2 plus 2 is going to be 4 hydrogens. Okay. So now, can I make 4 hydrogens over here on the other side? The answer to that question is if I put a 2 here, that will give me my 4 hydrogens, because I'm going to distribute. And it's going to also give me my 2 oxygens. And in order for me to balance the sodiums, I'm going to put a coefficient of 2 here. So that balances the sodiums. And I'm just going to put a coefficient of 1 over there, because that might help. No, we're good. That's all balanced. But I wanted you to see that sometimes, no matter how you try, you sometimes have to go back, erase, and go again. I did do that on purpose.
Why?
Because I wanted to show you that sometimes you have to go back and do it again.
It's a slippery snake.
Okay. Here's another one that I want you to try.
Wait, hold on.
Okay, you want me to go back?
What happened to that 3?
What 3?
So that.
We good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait.
They go those guys more?
Okay, I'll just watch the video.
Why not?
It's fine.
Okay.
Go with me.
I want you to try this one. Okay. Now, hey, guys, what's the very, very first thing you have to do here?
Count your variables.
That's the most articulate thing you've said in the last 2 weeks. Thank you.
What does that mean?
Everybody could understand it. So I'm going to start. I'll give you this start here. So this is a C, an H, and an O. A C, an H, and an O. So as Jalen would say, count yo elements. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It was articulate. Words, we could understand words. All right, so here we go. Counting our elements. A lot of you are getting good at this. So we have 2 carbons, 2 hydrogens, 2 oxygens. Over here I have 1 carbon, I have 2 hydrogens, and I have a grand total of 3 oxygens. Okay? We have it not even, but we're going to start balancing from left to right. And we start balancing from left to right. Are the carbons balanced?
Yeah. No.
No, they're not. So I'm going to put a coefficient of 2 here, which will distribute here and here. So that's going to give me my 2 carbons. It's going to give me 2 times 2, which will be 4, plus that 1, which will be 5. Yes, sir. Not yet. Okay. So at this point, I've got my 5 oxygens, and this is where things get a little bit fun. So the hydrogens are already balanced. The oxygens are not. Okay. Can I get 2 to go into 5 equally?
No, it's gonna be a decimal.
It would be a decimal, right? So in order for me to make this work, we gotta see it that way. So what is 5 divided by 2? Well, that would be 2, which is 4, which is 1. So it's 2.5. So can I put a 2.5 here?
No.
No, you can't have half. You can't go to the McDonald's and order a Big Mac and get half of a Big Mac. Like nobody orders, nobody goes to McDonald's and they're all like, hey, can I get 2.5 Big Macs? They don't cut it in half. Let me explain why. Stop. No, because here's the problem. Because then they're going to charge you for a full price because there's no button for half, and then you're going to be angry. So what ends up happening is that if this is the problem as it is, you take a look at it and you say, all right, this is balanced, okay, but you can't have half. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to multiply all of the subscripts by 2, or all of the coefficients by 2. And when I do that, I'm going to have a 2 here. I'm going to have a 5 here. I'm going to have a 4 here. And I'm going to have a 2 here. And I guarantee everything is balanced.
So,
pay half price.
You don't pay half price at McDonald's for anything.
you don't know that.
I do. I used to work there. It's my second job.
That was like 50 years ago.
Nobody works at McDonald's except every time you go to McDonald's, there's human beings there. Do you even have a job?
No, you broke, boy.
What?
That one I understand. He said you bro boy, which I think there's a K that he missed somewhere in there. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, did everybody copy this down?
Yeah.
This one was kind of hard. I get it.
Ford,
So
or O and R.
to review, here are some hints that you might want to put into your memory. This is not in your notes. So I'm suggesting that you copy this down,
Where?
like on the bottom of that. Now, your homework, ladies and gentlemen, guys, your homework is worksheet 3, okay? It's worksheet 3. That's your homework tonight. I'm going to give you time to work on that in class. I'm going to first stop this video, and then I'll leave this up here in case you